With CGMA being an online class, things can be a little different than your traditional schooling, where you sit in front of a teacher. Hearing me lecture over the next 10 weeks might be a little bit more difficult when you have no idea who I am, the work I've done, or why I'm qualified to teach you this class. So let's get down to it. My name is Anthony Vaccaro, and I've been a video game industry professional over the last 8 years, and I have shipped 5 critically acclaimed titles in that time. My first job in the industry was at Bungie, working on Halo Reach as an environment artist. Although for the majority of my career, I have been an environment artist at Naughty Dog, working on titles such as Uncharted 3, Uncharted 4, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, The Last of Us, and now I'm currently working on The Last of Us Part 2. Much like all of you, I also went to school for video game art. However, online schooling like CGMA was not really a thing when I started. There were not even that many YouTube tutorials on game development, to be honest. So I went to a slightly more traditional route of going to a brick and mortar school, the Art Institute of California, San Diego, where I got my bachelor's degree in game art and design. Through the Art Institute's close connection with Sony Online Entertainment down in San Diego, I was able to secure an internship they offered for my last quarter of school. I got to work on the EverQuest 1 team, which when I had started had just turned 10 years old. Not the most glamorous job to say the least. But I learned more about what it really meant to be an environment artist in 3 months there than I had ever did in school. It really showed me that school, while being a great foundation, is just that. You have to constantly pursue knowledge outside of the classroom and outside of work to keep up with this industry. If you don't, it'll just pass you by. By the end of my internship, I made it my full-time job getting my portfolio to rival that of regular industry professionals, which eventually paid off as I had my first offer from Bungie for a contract position as an environment artist working on Halo Reach. Working at one of my dream studios on a game franchise that literally shaped my youth was pretty much one of the coolest things you can accomplish, to say the least. While I loved my time at Bungie, I realized Southern California was and probably will always be my home. It's really hard to beat that weather in SoCal. Once my contract was over, my art lead, who as luck would have it, just happened to be the previous art lead at Naughty Dog, gave me a great recommendation. Shortly after, I got to work on their legendary grueling art test. And I nearly failed it. I tried to go above and beyond the given brief. I bit off way more than I could chew as I tried to turn this small ruin into a massive complex to show that I was hot shit. Well, they felt like my test was shit, as it was lacking the details and quality they were expecting. I made a space way too big and there was just no hope of finishing it to the quality level they were expecting. I was lucky, however, as they gave me a chance to course correct my test solely due to the fact that the previous environment art lead had recommended me in the first place. I got the job, but was close to losing out on working at another dream studio because I tried to be way too overly ambitious. It was my greatest lesson in quality over quantity. The first project I worked on while at Naughty Dog was the Caravan level, which is set in the deserts based off Wadi Rum, and began my love of making large organic environments. At Naughty Dog, each level is handled by 2 different artists, and we split up the responsibilities. An environment artist who models everything, builds the level itself, and manages things like collision and working with design. Then we also have a texture artist who creates textures and shaders for those assets. It's quite an uncommon way to work in the industry, as most studios you will have multiple people working on level. But we feel this gives a greater sense of ownership per level and allows us to truly specialize. I mention this as you should always be aware that each studio handles the job of environment artist differently than the next. After Uncharted 3, I began look dev on Uncharted 4. Since we were moving over from the PS3 to the PS4, we needed to establish what our next-gen look and pipeline would be. Midway through pre-production, however, we shifted our focus over to helping the rest of the studio finish up The Last of Us, jumping in on various levels to help bring them to completion. Back on Uncharted 4, I was tasked with establishing the look of Madagascar, our first ever drivable level in the Uncharted franchise. It was also our biggest level to date. It posed a ton of new challenges, like figuring out the visual language for the player to understand what they can and cannot drive the Jeep on, what the different types of surfaces the Jeep will traverse, how it affects the handling, and how to display that visually to the player. I worked on various other sections of Uncharted 4 as well, such as a Jungle River section, and part of the city Jeep chase level that was a big splash as our E3 demo. But the extra one I enjoyed the most was the small hidden reef in the open water boat level. This started out in pre-production, but was shelved for most of the game's development as the game was changing direction. Luckily, I was able to sneak it in as a hidden treasure location. After Uncharted 4 was in the bag, we moved our sights onto Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. This was supposed to be a nice, short little DLC. But even like students, we became really ambitious and tried to do everything we could to make it the great next amazing Uncharted. So it evolved from a small DLC to a full-fledged game. For The Lost Legacy, we wanted to expand upon what we did for Madagascar's semi-hub structure to create a fully player-driven explorable hub area. This would be the Western Ghats of India. I had the privilege of creating not only the design layout, but also the artistic look of this giant hub. While my designer focused on the combat and traversal sections, I was tasked with creating the flow of the entire hub map itself. It was the first time I fully had control over the design and the majority of the level, which really brought in a lot of new challenges on how to lead a player around a space like this. It was incorporating design and artistic elements in one. Keeping each zone of the hub feeling different and unique in terms of color, shape, foliage, and ruins was a delicate balance that required a ton of iteration. We strove to have each zone stand on their own while still having a cohesive feel. Beyond the work I've done in the studio, I've also had the privilege to give a handful of talks to students, write for various online articles such as Vertex magazine, and give a few workshop demos at my old school. Outside of 3D work, I love to travel and do some amateur photography. It allows me to flex different artistic muscles and focus more in on composition and lighting, which greatly benefits my 3D art. All this has led up to my time now here at CGMA, where I hope to pass on my knowledge to the next generation of environmenters, to the new up-and-comers that create the worlds even I have never seen, that excite me to want to learn more and eventually, one day, be the one who's inspired by all of you.